Welcome to another episode of Origins: A Creative Journey. Today, we are excited to bring you a conversation with Trent Slingshot of HipHopToyz. Welcome to the show, Trent.
Hey man, thanks for having me. What's good?
You, my friend, having you on the show is what's good.
All
Uh,
right, let's do this.
Excellent. So, I would love it if you could share with us where your creative journey began. What is your origin story into, and you feel free to jump into promotion, the toys, all of it. I'm just looking for your story, my friend.
Yeah, sure, man. Well, yeah, I'm from Sydney, Australia, and my background is a hip hop promoter. So I'm still doing that to this day. So pretty much for the last 30 years, I've been, touring hip hop artists. So basically, American hip hop artists I bring to Australia. And I do concerts around Australia. So, I've toured everyone to Australia from Tribe Called Quest to Big Daddy Kane to KRS-One, Biz Markie, rest in peace, MF Doom, rest in peace. So all these artists and so many more I've brought to Australia over the years and done tours around Australia. So we do concerts, usually 5 or 6 concerts, and also working with big music festivals in Australia to book their hip hop lineup. And then I've also done consultancy for record labels in Australia for hip hop albums, things like that, for TV shows like MTV and things like that. So yeah, man. So my background is, and that's really how my creative journey started. Even before that, I was a photographer. So I was a professional photographer for skateboarding and snowboarding. And that was sort of my first passion in life, I guess, was photography and skateboarding. So I mixed those two together. Yeah, I was never really a great skateboarder. So I knew pretty quick I was never going to turn pro in skating. And photography was my passion during high school. And yeah, man. So I just joined those two together. And then I went to the snowboarding side of things and photographed for magazines and for brands. And then what happened is there was a popular skate magazine from Australia called Slam. And I hit up the editor and said, can I start interviewing hip hop artists for the magazine? Start interviewing hip hop artists. So I interviewed the Beastie Boys once and a few other acts that would come out on tour to Australia, and I'd interview them and we put it in the Slam skating magazine. So that was sort of my start with getting involved with hip hop outside of just being a fan of the music. And then I started managing local artists as well in Australia. Local hip hop artists, became a manager. Yeah, and then started bringing out artists. The first artist I brought out to Australia was DJ Qbert back in '95, I believe. So yeah, and before that I was putting on local jams and things. So yeah, so that's sort of my introduction into hip hop and into the world of hip hop. And I just thought it was an opportunity that I was giving American hip hop artists to come out to Australia and perform to their fans there. And obviously, when I first started it, there was no internet, no social media, nothing like that, you know. So I'd be on like public telephones, calling managers or calling artists direct. You know, I remember once I called Cool Keith. He's like, "Yeah, man, I've been to Austria before," and I was like, "No, no, this is Australia, not Austria." And he's like, "Oh, damn." So it's like most of the artists that I would contact in the early 90s, early, mid, late 90s, you know, they'd never been to Australia before. And they didn't even, you know, they were stoked to hear that they had fans in Australia that knew their music because there was no social media back then, right? So, yeah, man. So it was an interesting journey. It's been a great journey. And then throughout that journey of being a hip hop promoter, you know, the culture of hip hop and I guess, the culture of collecting and collectibles, you know, really sort of goes hand in hand in many ways. Obviously, a lot of hip hop heads, a lot of hip hop fans are into collecting, maybe vinyl, or maybe they collected like Star Wars figures and things, or the two run parallel in many ways, I feel. So for me, the thing that I started collecting is hip hop toys and collectibles, basically. And when I started, there wasn't that many. So I sort of, was prided myself on trying to get everything that came out at that time, whether it's the De La Soul figures that PNB Nation put out, or different figures that had come out. But, there'd only be a few per year that would come out at that point at all. Or they would be all licensed as well. So yeah, so I was, I guess I'd say I was quite an early collector of figures and toys that were connected to hip hop culture. And then I started the Instagram page called HipHopToyz, which is really just a way for me to just, I guess when you've got a collection and it's at home, it's cool. But I mean, I guess if you're a really sociable person and you have lots of friends coming over every day and everything, it's cool to show off your collection to your friends. But, if you're more of a private person and not that many people come to your house and you got this super dope collection in your house, you want a way to, it's not really showing off, but it's more just, sharing your collection with other people. I guess a little bit of showing off to it, but it's a few things, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to start an Instagram page and just to showcase my collection and see if there's other people. To start with, it was more just to other Australian people that knew me as a promoter. Yeah, so that's kind of how it started. I think that was in 2015. I mean, anyone that looks at the Instagram page, which is at HipHopToyz, they can go back to the early posts and they'll see the progression of how this actually went from me being a collector of just showcasing what I have into an actual brand, which we can talk about. So yeah, that's pretty much the journey.
That's awesome. I want to go back for a second because I love, like, I knew that you were a hip hop promoter, and then this idea of how you got into hip hop promotion was actually through photography. And so
Exactly.
I'd love it if you could maybe take us through some of those early years too, of like, all right, so you're skating, you realize you're not likely to go pro, so you start taking shots. How did
Yeah.
you become a skateboarding and snowboarding photographer? Like, what was that transition from just, I assume you're like shooting your friends, into now you're selling to magazines and eventually you get to the point that you can
Right.
ask to interview hip hop artists?
Yeah, well, I mean, guess it goes back to school days, man. I have this memory of like school break when, pretty much all the dudes are out playing football, on the oval, and I'm there on the public phone at the school calling up editors of magazines trying to get them to publish my photos. So that's sort of my early memory. So, I mean, basically, like I said, I was actually into skateboarding first, and then I went to like a pro, like a demo, we call it, some Australian pro skaters. And I just had a really like basic camera, just an instant kind of style camera. And I just took that with me and just took some photos from the crowd. And back then, this is obviously before digital cameras. So you don't know what photo you took until you process the photo, right? So, I got back the photos. I took the photos into my local skate shop and showed the guy there what he thought. He was like, yeah, man, you got the shots right at the peak of the trick. And I was like, okay, that's cool. So, and I guess, these years are like, for me anyway, it's kind of where I'm still like finding myself of who I am and what I want to do in life and things like that. So then photography sort of started taking over my life of like, okay, I want to be a pro photographer. So the official school photographer and just shot for the magazine and stuff. But it went pretty quick into it, kind of skating and photography happened at the same time for me, really. And so I straight away wanted to just work for magazine and contribute photos to magazines.
That's super cool, Trent. And I imagine that early drive of you being on, public telephones, calling magazine editors to be like, hey, I want to submit to you. That skill I totally see in the idea of going out and having pre-internet days connecting with American hip hop artists to try to bring them to Australia. And I really want to kind of talk a little bit about that entrepreneurial drive of yours, because I know a lot of artists who are not the type of person to call up a random editor and be like, "Hey, I want to be in your magazine or a gallery or a
Yeah.
toy brand or whatever." Was that something that was easy for you, or did you have a model for that? How did you go about putting yourself out there and going for it?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I guess it's sort of some sort of confidence, but also kind of being scared at the same time and just kind of pushing yourself. And both my mom and my dad are both entrepreneurs. So I guess I kind of had that influence of just sort of taking that risk and also taking that responsibility for yourself and just trying to make something happen. And, I've always like the idea of kind of combining creativity with business in some way together. And I guess that's also why I then started managing some hip hop artists. So I've always enjoyed fusing those two worlds together of the creative world and the business world and kind of helping to be a conduit or whatever the word is, to work with people in those different worlds. So yeah, I guess that's started pretty early on, man, with that kind of a bit of I call it like the hustle mentality. But a kind of a business hustle, not as much a street hustle. Yeah. And then I also started my own magazine. So that was the next progression after being a photographer. I started a zine called Slingshot, basically, which was a combination of my three passions at the time, which was skateboarding, snowboarding, and hip hop. So the magazine had a combination of these three things. I think we did about 8 issues. And that was sort of my creative outlet and a little bit of my rebellious outlet. Because I guess when you're in your teens and your early 20s, you have a bit of a fuck the world kind of attitude a bit. And I guess that kind of comes out in different ways with people, right? Sometimes it can be in a more positive way, in a more negative way, and there's, or maybe yeah, you know, this comes out in different ways, I guess. And I was able to have my magazine as my kind of outlet as a male at that age of like kind of, you know, fighting themselves and a bit aggressive, you know, things like that, of like trying to channel that energy into something positive through the magazine. And so I'd write stories that were a bit controversial in the magazine and things like that, a little bit political, a little bit social, but just from my own perspective. But it was a good way for me to channel that energy rather than get into crime or get into alcohol or anything too crazy. I was blessed that I was able to make that happen as well.
I was giggling when you were calling yourself hustler because I called HUSTLER, hustler. Because Slingshot, that's
That's it.
actually what you are, man. Grew up in New York. I was one of the 3 white guys on the track team. So this is how I fell in love with hip hop. And then I ran
Right.
home for MTV Yo Raps. Like that's my whole childhood. Ice-T and
Yeah. Awesome.
KRS-One and all that, you know, the good stuff.
Yeah.
How in Australia do you find hip hop? Like,
Yeah. Other side of the world, literally.
yeah, literally
Yeah.
outside the world. And it's all these, you know, urban experiences. And I'd love to hear how you fall into this whole passion.
Yeah, man. Well, it's local radio was playing some hip hop, and there was some record stores that would have hip hop that would still bring in, you know, through distributors. So pretty early on, we found out about Fat Beats in New York and found out about all the, you know, I'm sure this story is the same in most countries of the world, is how they discovered hip hop, especially before the internet. And, you know, back in the late 70s into the 80s. And then moving forward is, I guess, certain movies, you know, Wild Style, Beat Street, these movies somehow made it to Australia. I'm sure the same as to other countries in Europe and same sort of thing. So I think it's probably an interesting topic that I don't think has really been covered before, is how hip hop, like you said, like started in the Bronx and sort of then how did it get to worldwide? And I'm sure there's, I don't know, millions of people that were kind of going through a similar kind of introduction and a similar falling in love and a passion for hip hop in all over the world at a similar rate. So I guess I just got swept up in all of that, and somehow, and I guess that's the one of the amazing things with hip hop. Even though I don't profess to understand the real energy of how hip hop started and certain elements of it, but somehow the music and the lyrical content resonates with people. I mean, outside of, let's say, outside of New York. So then obviously it resonates to people around the States and then resonates to people around the world. Even though they're a fan of that hip hop, there's obviously certain elements of it that they just will never understand or get. But there's other parts of the hip hop they do get and understand and feel some connection to it.
Which you take it and you start making this magazine, which you get 8 issues, which is
Yeah.
amazing that you get 8 issues. So I'd love to hear, how did you decide, okay, this is going to be my magazine. I'm going to start building the content. Did you like put together quirk? Did you staple it? I'd love to hear and find the audience. Like, how do you find this
Yeah,
total
yeah,
underground, which is hip hop, right?
yeah,
Magazine.
exactly.
Like you're living it.
Yeah,
Now you're doing it for a
yeah.
living.
Well, another passion of mine was, I guess, magazines, because like we are talking about, is before the internet, I'd be going to the newsstands, what we call news agencies in Australia, and see what magazines they've got, you know, looking for the latest Source hip hop magazine or the latest skate magazine, you know, Trans World Skating or something like that from the States. So I started becoming, you know, quite passionate and into just magazine culture and everything. And then by me working for other magazines, I started getting a little, I don't know, a little tired of it. You know, they take a long time to pay, or they don't put an article in that I spend time on writing, or, you know, just different things like that. So I guess my rebellious nature was like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to start my own magazine and put my own content in there. And I'm going to do something that's not typical for a magazine, because when I started Slingshot magazine, most magazines were just about one topic. So you just have only a skateboard magazine, or only a hip hop magazine, or, you know, only a snowboarding magazine. So I was like, nah, fuck that. I'm gonna do a magazine with a combination of all these things in it together. There must be other people out there that like cross section of these things together. So that was a cool thing with a magazine. And one of my big inspirations was a skate magazine called Big Brother, and that was put out by World Industries. And I really liked how Big Brother was a skateboard magazine, but they'd also do other random crazy shit in the magazine. that really had nothing to do with skateboarding, but had to do with I guess, the energy behind skateboarding. So that was one of my big inspirations of mixing Big Brother magazine from the States with then just my passion for magazine culture, then for hip hop, skating, snowboarding. So just sort of mixing, mashing it all together in a magazine. And yeah, to start with, I just photocopied it. I just made it free as well to start with. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to try and sell this because people don't know it. So I just put it in different record stores as a free, and skate shops just on the counter. So I'd go into these stores saying, hey, I made this magazine. Can I put the magazine on the counter for people to take? And it got a bit of a cult following that way because it was free anyway. And every size of the magazine was different. So some magazines would be like kind of like a large bookmark shape. Other would be a square, rectangle. So I do like these different shape each issue so people didn't know what they were going to get. There's some just random stuff on there. It's pretty cool. I'll send you guys some photos of the covers and things of the magazine. So, and I didn't want to call it a zine. I think I called it a megazine or something like that. So it wasn't like a magazine and it wasn't a zine, but ultimately I guess it was a zine. But, I had advertising in there. So record stores or record companies would advertise hip hop albums in there, and then I had skate stores advertise in there. So, and clothing brands. So it was cool, man. Yeah, it was an exciting time. It was fun.
This is so cool. One, because I love zines and independent publishing, but two, because it's such a fascinating journey that you're taking us on, Trent. And I'm chomping at the bit to get to the toy stuff. So we'll jump forward a little bit, but you started Instagram to share your collection with folks, and
Yeah.
then you decide to create your own toy company. So how did kind of that genesis happen? Like, what was the main idea behind the toy company? And can you take us over like how you started your own production studio and like getting toys made?
Well, yeah, as you said, I started just showcasing my private collection in Sydney. And I had my home office with all these dope collectibles around. And I was like, not many people come over to my office, because a home office, I don't really feel it's that professional environment to bring people over. So I'd always have meetings, outside home. So it'd only be like close friends that would come over and they'd love to see the collection. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start the page. It wasn't super original name, but I was like, oh, well, it is what it is. It's HipHopToyz and no one else had that name on Instagram. So I was like, okay, so yeah, showcase. And I kind of ran out of steam a little bit on it because after I took photos of all my collection, I didn't know what else to take photos of. There was probably a couple of years break when I just maybe wasn't buying or something anymore, or only buying like one, or there wasn't much coming out anyway. And then maybe I'd only buy one or two new things a year or something like that. So people can really see that journey on the Instagram page, which is cool. You'll see like big gaps in time, and that was really the reason why. And then I guess it was actually, I don't know, man, maybe like 2020 or something like this. I started getting back into it and I started really finding this whole subgenre, subculture of it's not really bootleg, but I guess people call it like bootleg hip hop bootleg hip hop figures, or mashups, things like that, unlicensed, So I'd find this world that I didn't really know about before. And that really caught my attention and interest. And then obviously brands, like, Super 7 or other brands would start putting out some hip hop figures more. So I was like, okay, this is what started for me as a sort of just showcasing my collection. Now there's a lot more coming out, a lot more brands doing things, or a lot more independent toy makers making things within that space. So it got my attention again. So I started posting what other people were doing and things like that. And I got this really interesting feedback from collectors in this. Like I would see like some serious collectors. Like I thought I was a serious collector of hip hop figures, right? And then I started seeing this world of other collectors in the States, mostly in the States, and that had like collections that just blew mine away. So I was like, damn, this is like some people really serious about this. So I reached out to them more just like, hey man, love your collection, it's cool. And the feedback I got, was really inspiring. Some of these like top collectors of hip hop figures in America would then message me back going, dude, like your page was actually my inspiration of starting my collection. So that kind of was a full circle moment to me. It was really cool to know that there were people in America seeing my collection that I didn't even know about, that then gave them some inspiration and motivation to start collecting and then just to take it to that next level. So that's sort of how things progressed to that point. And then I'd say during the pandemic, like everyone, kind of like life gets turned upside down and you're thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Me as a promoter, obviously I can't put on concerts anymore. I can't bring artists out, borders are closed, all that jazz. And so I started an online, like a hip hop shop, basically, just getting products from around the world and reselling it mainly to Australian audiences. So I do like online ads just targeted to Australian people in Australia and just selling like, jewelry or clothing or anything related to hip hop, basically. But I quickly found that the thing that I was most passionate about, I was sort of buying like rare and limited edition hip hop figures and then reselling them on my site. And I was really into that. And I thought that was the product I was most excited to sell more than sneakers or vinyl or anything like that, was these figures, because I kind of felt like I knew the most about that. And that was, what got me the most excited. So then the store was like, anyone that runs their own e-commerce store, it's, like anything, you got to be dedicated to it and there's challenges to it. I mean, I guess other than just having the right product, the big challenge is getting people to your site because, most people just go to eBay or Amazon to buy something, so how do you let people know that you have your own independent online store? So I was going through all of that e-commerce thing. After about, say, 2 years, I sort of realized, this e-commerce thing is not, it's not that exciting for me. And also just buying other people's products and reselling them, for me being like just a retailer in that way, or retailer, was also not that exciting for me, or wasn't really hitting spot for me. And I guess it's at that point I was like, and I guess this comes back to kind of my tenaciousness at the beginning of just getting on the phone, to editors and all that stuff, what you're saying. So I was like, oh, well, even though I have no experience in the toy industry or the toy world, I was like, oh, I'm just going to try and make some figures, something myself. And I reached out to one guy in, I think somewhere in Europe, and he made me a sample of a KRS-One figure that I still have to this day. And he posted it to me and I just wasn't happy with it. And then and that's, I guess, when the journey started, when I connected with Lee from Remakes Plethora. And I contacted Lee. I was like, hey, I'm trying to, actually, even then, it wasn't really starting a toy brand as such. It was more like, let's just make some figures that I can then sell. So that's when I connected with Lee in North Carolina. And I saw he did a figure of Shock G from Digital Underground. So he did a bootleg figure of Shock G. And I saw that. I thought it was pretty cool. So I reached out to him and said, hey, do you want to work with me to make this KRS-One figure? And he was like, yeah, man, let's do it. At that point, Lee was sort of doing commission work, and he had his own thing going on with doing some horror film figures and then some mashup hip hop figures a little bit. I'll let you ask the next question, but that's kind of the genesis of it. And then it's sort of grew from there.
Our next question is going to be, how did it grow from there? Feel free to just
Yeah,
keep
yeah,
going because
yeah.
I'm loving this journey. I just want to hear, like, yeah, so you reach out to Lee, you're
Yeah,
making KRS-One. What comes next?
that's right. So I reached out to Lee. We made the figure. I think we made like just 20 or something. They sold really quick. I was like, this was cool. Gave me a good feeling, a better feeling of selling something that I was a part of the creative process rather than just buying a figure from another brand and then reselling it with a markup. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's always fun to make some money, but for me, it's always been about, how do you make the money, not just the money itself. So for me, it was exciting to be a part of a creative process of this figure. I used one of my graphic designers from Australia who was doing a lot of my hip hop like flyers for tours. So I worked with him to do the backing card, and then Lee made the figure, and it sold well. I just put it on because I already had the HipHopToyz Instagram page, so I put it on there. Sold really fast. And then I guess we did a second figure, which is a Dr. Octagon Cool Keith figure, which is a remake of a figure that had come out before. And then I approached Cool Keith's management and said, can we re-release this figure, but with our own twist on it, different paint job, different backing artwork? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. Because the first time it was released, I think they never got royalties for it, or they didn't know what happened to the toy maker. So they're like, let's do it. And that did really well. That sold really fast. That's this one. I don't know if we ever do video, but yeah, this one here. So this was our second figure, and and this was licensed, with Cool Keith. So that did really well, and that's when I started, chatting with Lee from Remakes about maybe this is a little medium or big, who knows, but maybe this is the beginning of a toy brand, and that really was exciting for me because up until that point, so we're talking only about 2 years ago, up until that point, I'd never really had my own brand of anything, and being a hip hop promoter has always been cool, but and I have my own brand, which is Slingshot. But at the end of the day, I'm really, which is not a bad thing, but I'm really contributing to the art, to really just the artist's own brand as being a promoting them, which was cool. But to actually have my own toy brand, or to start on that anyway, just felt exciting for me, and felt, scary in the way that I didn't know what I'm doing. Like, I have no experience in the toy world and in brand development, nothing like that really. But just sort of mainly we're talking about it and just say, yeah, let's just keep pumping these out. If people like them and are buying them, let's just keep pumping them out. And the first few we did were, I don't really call them bootleg figures. I call them tribute figures, where we just do a couple of figures and where we do a bit of a mashup style and something that we could just, pump out quickly and see what the vibe was. And then I reached out to some artists that I knew personally, like Master Ace, for example, in New York, legendary New York MC. And he was like, yeah, cool, let's do a figure. So we did licensed figure with him. So I guess that's where things really transition from the brand being a tribute, bootleg, unlicensed kind of thing, to then becoming more a full-fledged licensed brand. Because, I guess for two main reasons. One is I know a lot of artists personally from being a promoter for 30 years, obviously. And so I want to do the right thing by them, but also, let the artist have a chance to make some royalty money on it, which of course they deserve. It's a figure of them. And I feel like, we're just putting ourselves in a more legitimate space in the toy industry and toy world by having licensed figures. So pretty much now, I'd say, let's say 100%, 95% of our figures are all official now and licensed, which, because I don't come from the independent toy world, which Lee from Remakes Plethora, he's more from that world of being an independent artist, independent toy maker. But I'm from the world of promoting and the business world. So it's an interesting synergy there we have, and it's made me want to try and make this brand, even though we're only 2 years young and we don't really know what we're doing. I wanted to try and make it as legit brand as I can, as quick as I can. But yeah.
All right, Slingshot. This is why I love you, man. This has been a great journey. And it's the reason I found you. I found you because the stuff you were doing with Jurassic 5 and
Right, Charlie Tuna. Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
that whole video with him talking, and I'm like, wait a minute, these guys are legit. These are the real deal my important years.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the things that influenced me. But you guys were legit. Like, you're getting the real Tracy, the real KRS, the real Jurassic. So
Yeah.
which just made it so much cooler. And that's how I found you. And then when I saw you at Decon, I was like,
Nice. That's the thing, is I come from that unique opportunity that I know a lot of these artists, either they're friends of mine personally, or at least I've done legitimate good business with them in the past. So they know who I am on a business level, or they know who I am on a personal level. So it's great to give something back to them, give some respect back to them, and an opportunity for them to have a figure. Because if you think about it, up until this point, the only artists that would have figures or legit figures would be massive hip hop artists. I mean, not to say the artists we work with are not massive, but I guess my point is, like, up until we started, the only chance for hip hop artists to have a figure was more through like Funko maybe, or something like this, and obviously you get, some Kid Robot had put out some stuff every now and then, but mostly be Biggie, Tupac, Eminem, figures. And then obviously people that know this stuff know that there's multiple types of figures of those artists. So it's a very kind of small pool of artists that had their own toy or figure. And that's kind of where I saw this opportunity, that why does that have to be? Why is there only Biggie or Tupac or Eminem or something like this figures? Why are there no figures of other more independent or underground artists available? And I guess that's kind of where it all sort of started clicking for me as well.
dude, that's literally why I fell in love with your stuff. It was, you were making toys of the giants in my world, right? And I love that. Again, I love that you're giving back to the artists and everything else. I'd love to hear, because you're a hustler, which I, again, appreciate beyond words. And I come from the music industry. We used to use the term, you threw it against the wall, and if it stuck, it was great, right?
Right.
You're kind of that mentality, which is hip hop, throw against the wall, see what sticks. I would love to know, what was the biggest challenge that you threw against the wall and didn't stick?
I mean, the two challenges, obviously, one, if you put out a figure and it doesn't sell as many as you hoped or you think it might sell, it's a little bit, because you put your heart and soul into it, if it doesn't sell that well, it's, well, your heart and soul, and of course your time and money. So there's, you know, four things you put into it. So if it doesn't sell as well as you hoped or think it would, disappointing. It's because this is not just a financial business, you know, where I'm just only trying to make money. It's also trying to do something that people appreciate and there's something good for the artist. So if it doesn't sell that well, then it's not great for anyone, but it is what it is. And that's part of, like you said, part of just putting out the product and seeing what works and what doesn't. And then I guess the other part too of your question is, if I reach out to an artist and they either say, no, I don't want to do it, it's like, oh damn, like it would have been cool, right? Or if they say, yeah, maybe, and then I make a figure, you know, we make a figure of them and send it to them, and then they say no. They're like, no, I don't think this represents me, or it's not going to work, or maybe the financial terms are not good enough for them, or something like that. But other than those two challenges, which are a bit of a downer, but other than that, it's all positive. It's all love, and it's exciting times.
That's super cool. I think your outlook on this is so positive and so generous in that you're really trying to co-create these figures with the artists themselves and with your partner Leo. And to your point, it's like, oh yeah, there's all these artists who aren't Biggie, Tupac, Eminem. But I would love to know, like, how do you go about curating in which artists you want to do a figure? Is it purely based on relationships? And I think maybe the question behind the question that I'm asking is to maybe put you on more of the business side as opposed to the creative side. What should artists be doing, or what can artists be doing to sort of get on the radar? Right? Because you were that artist who was pitching to the magazines a long time ago. Now you're sort of the institution that's going out and curating in talent. Do you have any advice for those people who, you know, hip hop or not, but just people who are looking to gain the attention and maybe credibility and opportunities that a toy company, a hip hop producer, a gallery, whatever might be looking for?
Yeah, I work, you know, in two ways. It's either one with an artist that I know direct, that I've worked with before, or if it's an artist that I just am a fan of their music. And also, it's not just the music. I think it's also their image and their vibe around themselves. If it lends themselves to a figure, you know, because it's kind of like, in some ways, I feel like we're turning an artist, you know, into kind of like a superhero in a way by creating this figure of them. And I guess to a lot of people, you know, they are, you know, a lot of people that listen, a lot of fans that listen to their favorite artist, their artist is a bit like a superhero, right? Like gives them advice, or, you know, through their lyrics or whatever it is. And so I feel like the energy behind the artist and the imagery that they already have, whether it's the album covers or the clothes they wear or things like that, you know, if it sort of makes sense in that way, then, because some artists you think of and you're like, oh yeah, that artist would be perfect as a figure. For example, the Big Daddy Kane is like classic stance and the clothing, and then we put, like, you know, from the old MTV or MTV Raps card on the back style. So I think to me, that's really what it comes down to. Some artists do reach out to us that are even more sort of independent and say, you know, can you help us make a figure of ourselves, where they want to then, you know, but that's not really a service that we offer. But if you're an artist, you could find probably a toy maker that would make some figures of yourself, and then you can sell them as merch or something like that, or do a deal with a toy brand. Yeah. But for us, because the way we do our selling is all based on pre-order. So Lee in North Carolina is the one that's making the figures. And yeah, we have a backlog of orders. So we sort of don't really do commission work for artists. It's really up to us to find the artist that we think is going to work with it, with our brand.
I love that the approach of this, like finding the right person fits your right brand that fits the right person. Like the Big Daddy Kane's a perfect example.
Right.
Like, you know, when he came out with the chain and the look and the girls and the whole thing, like he was a superhero, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a perfect
Yeah,
mix.
exactly. Yeah.
This, we're going to change a little the subject, but it'll fit. To me, this was the power of hip hop.
Oops.
Public Enemy changed my life, like my look out on the world, right?
Yeah.
Ice-T is my favorite artist of all time. Ice was a different view from the world and how he saw stuff. And to me, that was the power of that music and that time. And you being a fan at about the same age, and what you've been talking about as superheroes, I'd love to hear, like, Public Enemy changed my life, made me look at what was the
Yeah, man.
artist or the people or the act that like was your superhero? that, oh, now I got to do a toy from, like that big of an influence on you?
Man, to be honest, like definitely Ice-T was one of them from when I was first getting into hip hop. For me, it was Ice-T, Public Enemy, KRS-One. I mean, these acts really changed my outlook on life as well, even though I couldn't really relate to their life or their struggle or their experience. But in some strange way, like we were talking about before, the message also transcends cultures and continents, you know? You know, I guess those three artists were pretty influential in me just getting really excited and really passionate about hip hop. You know, is yeah, probably Ice-T, KRS, Public Enemy, Beastie Boys for sure. A few acts around that era that really kind of, you know, Eric B and Rakim, of course. So those acts just sort of set me on my path of passion for hip hop. But in terms of getting involved in the business level of it and the promoting level, it was all the 90s hip hop is where things started really catching on for me. Because if during the 80s, I was still at an age where I was more of a fan, right? But during the 90s is when I sort of worked out, okay, I want to actually bring some current acts from the early 90s to Australia, whether it's Souls of Mischief or The Far Side or Jurassic 5, all these acts that I brought to Australia, all like were my kind of early 90s heroes, you know? If I can recreate some of that energy with the figures, that's awesome, man, because it's, yeah, you get it 100%, you know?
Because, you know, back to your point, they were the superheroes. That's why I found it interesting that, you know, you take a toy and make it a superhero.
Yeah, like for me, that's a bit of a feeling of what we're trying to accomplish. Because classic action figures, when you think about action figure, you generally think about a superhero, right? You think about a Batman figure or a Star Wars, you know, whatever. So, you know, I think that's, you know, a lot of the beginning stages of toy industry for figures was based around superheroes, right? So I think it's almost like I don't know, it's almost like something that's sort of in the subconsciousness of people of like figures and superheroes kind of mixed together. Doesn't actually have to be a traditional superhero. We can make our own superheroes, which are hip hop artists, you know?
Trent, you have just had an amazing career of hustling and moving and jumping and following your passions. If you had to say something to your younger self or a younger person
Right.
who's looking to follow their dreams, what would you tell them? Like, I'm a little kid and go, Trent, I want to be like you. What would you say to me?
I guess it's just general lessons of life, right? It's like timing, influence, perspective, being humble, being open to ideas. I think that's the big thing is I like to be a yes person rather than a no person, or at least say yes more than I say no. I think the deeper meaning of that is just sort of giving opportunities a chance and also just trying to have an open spirit to just creative mind of just seeing what possibilities are out there to do something, you know, and not sort of, yeah, I mean, just kind of navigating, right? But between whether it's friends or family that say, nah, you can't do that, or it's not going to work, or whether it's social media kind of seeing everybody else's amazing lives and then thinking, oh, you know, I'm just sitting here at home doing nothing and this dude's out traveling the world or whatever it is, you know, so you kind of got these different sort of influences or pressures, you know, and it's about, you know, from my perspective anyway, it's about trying to see if you can quieten that noise, that kind of outside noise, and just think, okay, what can I do that represents my spirit and soul and my integrity? Like I said before, for me, everything I've done has never been purely about money, you know. It's been about what can I do to satisfy my soul and satisfy what I think I'm doing that excites me. And then the second part is, okay, how can I actually try and maybe make some money from that? But the first goal is the passion and the self-satisfaction, you know. So I guess just adding to that is then how can I do that in an integral way, you know, in a real honest way, just to be myself. You know, even the fact us doing the HipHopToyz, you know, is very humbling for me because, you know, first of all, I'm not American. Second of all, I'm not African American. So the experience for me is different. So all I can do is just tell my honest story, you know, my honest path, and just realize that I'm still a guest of the culture and just trying to be humble and respectful along the way is important for me. And I hope that energy then translates to other people, you know, that they can feel that.
Definitely the vibe comes across, Trent, and I think that's great advice for anyone looking to get in on the hustle and to emulate some of the legacy building that you've done. This has been awesome, Trent, but I do know we haven't got to talk about the trains yet. Can you tell us a little bit more about the product lines that you are building besides the action figures?
I mean, even just within the figures themselves, we have a few different ranges. So we have the fully painted range, which is our premium line. which are like 6-inch figures. And we started at 375 figures. You know, once again, just thinking outside the box, we're like, oh, well, even though that's sort of the industry standard, you know, we wanted to make ourselves different to some other toy makers that are out there. So we're like, okay, let's change this now. Let's do 6-inch figures. So all our hand painted figures now are 6-inch, which we call our premium range. And then we have a second range, which was called our sprays, which is like, for example, this Charlie Tuna that you were talking about is like, so this is like a two-tone, like a duotone airbrush figure, which is like a metallic paint airbrush figure. So we make these type of figures a little more accessible, like a lot more reasonable price point, and something that people can sort of get into the brand through our sprays line and then move up into the hand painted. So, and then we're also about to introduce some larger figures, which are going to be 11, 12-inch figures, which is going to be exciting. So we previewed some of them at Decon. So we're going to card them up and blister them up. And that should be something pretty cool that's not really out there at the moment. And then we also have these New York subway trains, which I linked up with my boy Dave at Definitive Projects in California. And yeah, we make these, they're like replica New York MTA subway trains, 1:100 scale. And yeah, we work with some amazing graffiti artists, mostly New York artists, not exclusive to New York artists, but mostly New York based artists, that we do a license deal with them to work with them. They design the artwork for the train, and it's been a really popular range at the moment. We've already done 8 trains with some graph legends, you know, like Lady Pink, Cope, T-Kid, the Tats crew we've done trains with, Mark Bode. So we've got trains coming out with Dondi with us. So yeah, so it's something cool because it's an exclusive, like, unique line, and people love them. And the trains are battery operated, so they have flashing lights and sound with them and pullback motion as well. So it's a cool collectible that actually you can actually play with if you want with your kids or whatever. And so that's pretty cool. And then we also do these customized G-Shock watches as well. So we take a real G-Shock and then we customize it, and we do a license deal with the artist. So this one here I'm showing is a Beatnuts watch. So we customize the back engraving. We even customize the back light. I don't know if you can see, but we do customization on the light. And so yeah, once again, we do a deal with the artist, and we've released maybe 10 or more watches with different artists. We just did a Dell the Funky Homo Sapien watch. We did a Jay Dilla watch, Souls of Mischief, Farside, Jedi Mind Tricks. Like, we've got Beatnuts coming up. We've got the Alcoholics watch. So yeah, so our product range, we're just trying to develop that and see what we can do within that space under the banner of HipHopToyz.
Super awesome. And Trent, where is the best place for people to find you, HipHopToyz, all of the awesome stuff that you're developing? Where should people go?
The medium length answer to that is, I mean, we started as an online brand, I guess as an Instagram brand, for want of a better description. And we still kind of are that, but at the same time, it's amazing to be able to do some toy cons where people can really see us in person. They can see the product, and they can meet myself, they can meet Lee, and they can see some of the process. So that's super exciting because it takes us out of the realm of just being an online brand to something in the real world, And so we did DesignerCon, we do 5 Points Festival in Brooklyn, and we might do a few others this year if we can. So people can really see us through Instagram, HipHopToyz, with a Z at the end, and also our online store, which is hiphoptoyz.com. So that's the way for people to connect with us and see our products day to day. Come and meet us in person and say what's up when we're at a con, and maybe in the future we'll have some pop-up stores or our own store in New York or something. Let's see how we go.
By the way, shout out for the trains. It's straight out of the movie Breaking, so it even fits better. Like, it's that
cool
way to catch the culture. Okay,
I'll get you one. Send me your address. Get one sent to you.
How we like to end the show is we always give our guests the final word. Anything and everything's on the table, and the floor is yours, my friend. And thank you.
I mean, the main thing for me is just to give thanks, is to give gratitude. I'm definitely a person of attitude of gratitude. And, I'm super grateful, obviously, to customers, especially we have some great, like, collectors that just get everything that we put out, or most things we put out. So that's a blessing, and super grateful. And obviously all the artists that have said yes, some have said no, but most have said yes. And I'm super grateful for that, whether it's Master Ace or Charlie Tuna or Cool Keith, Big Daddy Kane, Ice-T, Sean Price's wife, Bernadette, Drink Champs guys, Some of the Wu-Tang artists we've got figures with, You God, Inspector Deck, maybe Jizza, all the artists that we officially licensed with that have given us, the opportunity to work with them, and also given us sort of the creative confidence in us, to represent them. So really that's the final words, just grateful. And, we just keep moving forward and see what we can do for the culture and see what we can do for, try and put a little bit of a spanner in the works or a little bit of something different to the toy world,
Thank you for joining Rick and myself on another episode of Origins, A Creative Journey, a Designer Con production. Please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, download and listen to us every place you get your favorite podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Origins, A Creative Journey, all one word. Drop us an email for thoughts, ideas, or maybe somebody you'd like us to interview at dconpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you join us in Las Vegas for DesignerCon, North America's premier annual design convention. All the information can be found, including tickets, at designercon.com. Till then, enjoy your own creative journey.